Hey everyone, today I'm doing a build guide, and this time for Sir Mordred. Mordred, of course, is the main character of the game, and everyone's going to have access to from the very beginning, and going to be the defender that most players are going to be sticking with throughout the game, given that he's required on all of the story missions. Many players, however, probably won't be complaining that they'll be sticking with Sir Mordred, as he's an extremely powerful hero with some great skill options that are unique to him compared to other defenders. The way I built my Mordred is to essentially ignore most of his damage dealing options and play into his absurd tankiness, resilience, and ranged debuff support options. When you're building your team, Mordred's damage is never going to compare to a champion, vanguard, arcanist, etc. Because of this, I don't really see a point in trying to boost his damage when you're in the late game or end game. As usual, I'm going to start with the essences. First up here, we have the Essence of Hemorrhage. This essence grants plus 20% bleed damage, and as far as this build goes, it's also a mistake. This is the first essence I gave him when I was trying to make him more of an offensive-oriented Mordred during the early game, like Act 1. If you're going for this build style, don't make the same mistake as me. Instead, I would probably keep this slot open and replace this essence with one of two alternatives. My first choice would be this Essence of Fortification for an additional 5% block, as this just provides flat damage negation and is great for a tanky style build. My second choice would be Essence of Salubrity, however you say that, and grants plus 5% additional vitality. This one is fine because obviously more vitality means he's going to be able to take more hits, but in practice, most missions you're not going to be taking a lot of vitality damage. Now for the essences I don't regret, starting with the Essence of Deflection. This reduces incoming range damage by 25%. Mordred's going to be on the front lines a lot, trying to draw attention to himself, so he's going to be taking a lot of shots. So this damage reduction can really add up pretty quickly. Next is Essence of Armor, plus 3 armor, very simple. It doesn't sound like a whole lot, but every little bit helps in my opinion. Lastly, Essence of Life, plus 5% additional HP. Now this one is great and much better than the plus 5% of vitality, because HP damage is going to be the bulk of what you're taking, and HP is obviously much easier to restore in the middle of a fight, whether it's through a potion or a campfire, and of course this also automatically resets at the beginning of a new mission. Now as we move to gear, like before, I'd just like to say that looking for these specific pieces is going to be up to RNG. So just finding pieces of gear with similar effects should get you a result that's very similar or close to what I'm going to be showing here, and should perform about the same. Starting with his armor, the Hex Mark of Impunity. The biggest thing on this is that when hit, always turn towards the attacking unit. This is really huge because it means he can't get backstabbed, and he will always be blocking the incoming attack, as it will be a frontward facing attack. Additionally, he will be ignoring 50% of incoming armor break. This is great because it just lets his huge armor pool last that much longer. And then the extra HP is also good, just to make him a bit more tanky. And then as you can see, there's also this 5% damage buff until the end of the encounter for each hit received. This is fine and will definitely help, as more damage is always nice, but as I mentioned before, his damage is just so low in the endgame compared to the other units you're going to bring in with you, that this isn't really irrelevant, and you should definitely focus on those first two abilities over this third one. The HP is mostly a bonus. Now for his weapon, Breakwater Hex Rune. This provides a whopping plus 10% block chance, which, as I mentioned before, is just raw damage negation. That's huge. Additionally, regaining 3 armor at the start of each encounter is also very useful, especially on higher difficulties where the campfires are much less effective. This gives you much more self-sustain going from fight to fight. Plus 27% physical debuff resist is just making him more resilient and less likely to have the CCs have any sort of meaningful impact on him. And again, plus 5 armor when resting, just very useful for the higher difficulties where you're not going to be getting much armor back on those campfires. Now here, for his accessory, we have the Stone of Distraction. The main reason that I'm running this item is because melee attacks against him now cost +1. This is very useful as in many situations you're going to have your Mordred up taking on multiple enemies at once, having him get just ganged up on. So he's going to have a lot of attacks coming in on him. But with this item, their attacks are more expensive, which means they're going to be getting less attacks in. And if it's just 1v1, sure, that's one less attack, not a big deal. But if it's 1v3, 1v4, all of a sudden that's 3 less attacks, 4 less attacks. So that really adds up and can really help him just last that much longer. A dodge first incoming attack, that's nice. Just, again, one less attack. Over the course of an entire encounter, that's not huge, but it's useful. And then we have these other effects here that involve his vitality. That does make him tankier, so that's nothing to outright dismiss. But as I mentioned before, with this kind of build, he's not going to be taking vitality much in the first place. So this isn't a huge deal, but if he does take a little bit, the gain he gets back at the end of the mission is nice for not having to put him in the hospice. Lastly, we have his Oath Stone, the Herald's Oath. The extra health per hit is useful to give him more self-sustain. The extra HP is obviously nice for just some flat tankiness. And then the physical debuff resist, again, just making him that much more resistant to the enemy's debuffs trying to make him ineffective. The best part of this item, however, is that damage reflection. With this, you will see enemy after enemy killing themselves, trying to take him down, and the ones that don't kill themselves on him will just be softening themselves up for your own damage dealers to come in and just sweep him off that much easier. This gets a lot of mileage. Now the main part, the skills. As you can see, I have taken none of his melee attack options and only one talent on strike to refund 1 AP for the first strike per turn. I took this because sometimes it'll enable him to get attack in and then still follow up with a cast, so that way he can get a little bit of chip damage here and there between his spell casting and support options that I like to use him for. Aside from that, I also took all of the talents that boost his vitality, his HP, his block, self-heals on hit, and mental or physical debuff resistance. Basically, just simply put, everything that's going to make his stats that much tankier and allow him to take even more hits. You can see them over here. As you can see, I'm actually over the physical debuff resistance cap, but I wanted to keep the skill tree like this for anyone that may not be lucky enough to get plus 54% physical debuff resist from their gear. I'm going to assume that's probably not going to be standard, so having the physical debuff resist from the talents will actually still contribute to this build and be quite useful. To start with here, I took Shield Charge, and everyone should be taking Shield Charge no matter what kind of build you're using for him. It offers huge mobility to immediately engage the enemy or rush to an ally's defense for only 1 AP, and CC the target in the form of a knockdown. Here I increased its range and decreased the cooldown. I also took this extra damage just because I'm using it a lot, and I know we're not focusing on damage, but I did have an extra skill point. As when I was building my Mordred, going through the story, I pretty much took every opportunity to funnel extra skill points into him through tomes or those like crones you talk to in the middle of a mission, as I imagine many other players probably are also doing with their Mordred. But you could easily reassign this one skill point to something else, like extra damage on Thunderbolt, which we're going to get to later, or armor break on the Stigma, which I'm going to cover next. I just kind of had a free skill point, just kind of put it there. I didn't take momentum, which resets the cooldown on shield charge if it kills someone, because, again, the damage is so low. Killing an enemy with shield charge is just so rare, it just didn't feel like a consistent enough proc to be worth the investment. Second here, we have Stigma, which is a huge skill for him. It's a very powerful debuff that makes the enemy take 30% more damage for 2 turns and only cost 1 AP with all of these upgrades. It is just an amazing debuff. As I mentioned before, I ignored the armor loss on this one just because with my team comp I had plenty of armor loss or armor breaking already, so I just didn't think it was necessary. Next is Thunderbolt, another amazing spell. It has incredibly high range, it does decent damage, it has armor break if you talent into it, even more range with this talent, it ignores cover, and it can stun. That is just insane. It does a whole lot with one simple spell. It is just great. There's nothing else really to say about it. Finally is Chain Lightning, and here we're taking all of the upgrades on this. With this, it can target up to 4 enemies, and this gives it a level of spread that is unmatched by any other AoE in the game, and it can apply shock to those 4 enemies and reduce their AP. And additionally, we're taking the AP reduction talent on it to make it not extremely expensive to use. Here again, I also took some extra damage, just because this is a spell I'm pretty much throwing out on cooldown, and it's an AoE, I'm always up for increasing AoE damage. Between these 3 spells here, Mordred has the ability to offer consistent support to the rest of his party through the form of debuffs and crowd control, even if he's off in a corner by himself taking on 5 enemies at once. This is something that just can't be replicated by any other defender. With everything covered, let's jump into some gameplay. Alright, here we are in the first fight of the Cult of Midnight mission, level 24. This is in the endgame, and I am playing on very difficult as usual. So in this gameplay, we're going to be focusing on showcasing Mordred's tankiness and his debuff support. So to open up here, we can see we have a Banshee over here, we have this Spellcaster, and some various amounts of undeads backing them up. So to take some pressure off of my allies here, we're going to move Mordred actually up a little bit. Mordred does not come with a taunt, however the AI will prioritize enemies that are closer, so simply by doing this, he's essentially taunting. I'm going to have my backline just stun him so he doesn't interfere, and let's just pass our turns and we'll see the attacks coming in and see how Mordred handles it. Seems like they're a bit too far away, a bit expected, but now we're going to get Mordred deep in there and see how that goes. Shield right there, gets in there for 1 AP. Let's go and put Stigma. Now with that vulnerability debuff, opening up the Banshees for some extra damage, that allows our ranged units here to really lay in some heavy damage. And I have tested this before. Normally Morgana cannot kill this unit without that Stigma cast on her. Now with the Stigma, just enough to get it into -11 and secure the kill. Now, with Mordred being surrounded like this, you may be concerned about him getting flanked and such, but remember, we have that armor piece that prevents him from getting flanked. You see, he has this bleed debuff, bypassing a lot of his armor. That's a bit unfortunate, but that's fine. Let's put you out so that we don't start shooting down here again. All of these guys seem to be pretty focused. This guy's kind of shooting down here a little bit, so we don't want him casting stuff at the rest of our group, so we're going to stun him. Alright, Mordred. Take that beating. And look at that. He took 0 damage. 0 armor damage, 0 health damage, and these enemies are just whittling away at their own health. But why give them the chance to get all those attacks in, just to show off this shock support here. Just bash everyone's turns. It's fine, Mordred isn't in a rush. And again, the only damage he's taking is from this bleed debuff this mage keeps putting on him. So, you know, we're going to put a stigma, because as you can see, the thunderbolt isn't going to kill. But if we put stigma on, now it kills. Just because we can. There you have it. This Revenant managed to get some damage in because his damage capacity is high enough that he's shredding some armor, but I mean, we've gone by 3-4 turns and Mordred has lost 5 armor. That's nothing. Alright, let's go ahead and wrap up this fight, and we can move on to the next one. Okay, here we are in a second fight. Same mission, more of the Lost. Looks like we have a lot of melee combatants here. So that's perfect, as they can rush in on Mordred, and we just got this one little cultist here in the back that we're going to have to deal with. So let's go ahead and move Mordred up. And you know what, we're just going to have him move all the way up. Bait in as many of them as possible. The rest of our team's just going to pass and watch the show. And I'm sure you've noticed there's been that 60% bleeding resist. That is because of that high debuff resist percentages that we were talking about earlier. Otherwise, he'd be hemorrhaging even more. So that's why I think it's just very important to build into having those high resistances. Alright, so yeah, you're annoying. We're just going to cast a Stigma. Thunderbolt. And then we're going to pass. And again, he is taking no damage, just that bleed damage. Alright, looks like he's getting a bit closer. I think we can probably snag a Chain Lightning over to him. Perfect. Decrease that AP. And let's go ahead and have him get a swing in. Get a little bit of health. We're going to go ahead and pass again. Alright, so there you have it. Our just brick wall of Mordred, throwing down mitigation tools left and right to keep the annoying targets more docile and enabling damage on them. Alright, and here we have one last fight. I decided to switch over missions to Three Sisters because I know it has this mini-boss type enemy here that spawns in who does much more of a punch than anything else we've been fighting so far. Thought he would be a good example to really show how Mordred handles some high incoming damage type situations. So we're gonna cast Stigma. Gonna shock him. And we're just gonna get in there. And watch the show. 100% resisted on that vulnerability. Block. Took no damage. He took 11 for hitting us. So just drop a stun on him. 50% resist, so that means he won't skip his turn, but his turn will be greatly diminished. Just pass again. Oh, I guess it was enough with the shock to skip his turn. Again. Just gonna debuff him. Start swinging. And pass. Alright, with no debuffs, let's see how you do. Oh, looks like he's running past it because he realized, you know, not much point. Oh, trying to flank. He used an ability, so we didn't turn to face, but as you can see, even with a non-direct hit, did 2 armor and only 19 HP. No. Drop another stun on him. We don't want him coming over here, so we're going to put a slow. Guess he just has really low AP. Stun is enough to mess him up. Doesn't have enough AP left over to actually do anything. Shock. We're going to do an attack in first this time, because it gives us that 1 AP refund, and we're going to put Stigma up. %, resisted. 1 armor. I mean, there you have it. Even on very hard, these elite type enemies, they're doing absolutely nothing to this guy, and he's just slowly but surely killing himself off. So as you saw from the gameplay, Sir Mordred is just an absolute beast when it comes to defense. Whether he be 1v1ing an elite enemy with high damage potential and just mitigating nearly all of it and keeping them CC'd so they can barely fight back, or taking on 5+ enemies at a time, all on his lonesome, completely surrounded, just pivoting around to block all these incoming attacks. He is taking nothing. As you saw with this high debuff resist, that bleed was doing less than half its normal damage it was supposed to do, and that was bypassing the armor, or that vulnerability debuff being completely negated outright. Sir Mordred is just a tank, and even on very hard difficulty, you're pretty much never going to be putting him in the hospice once you get him up and running. He doesn't need taunt like some of the other defenders have. As you saw, you just put him up there, and they'll just flock to him. That's just how the AI works. Maybe if they tweak the AI, that may change, but I mean, I don't really see that happening. So as it stands, he just, in the tank department, has everything covered. And then as you saw with his debuffs and support, he can enable kills for your teammates that may normally be outside of kill range. He can stun and lock down annoying enemies that are hiding in the back, and just applying the shock on groups of enemies to just prevent them from getting attacks in on allies, or from trying to run past him to get to allies. I hope you enjoyed the build. Take it into your own games and just completely stonewall enemies of your own. And yeah, thanks for watching.